Vienna is famous for salons, so we decided also to do one, very much being the Political Salon, and this is a joint enterprise with ERSTE Foundation and with Die Presse. And this is part of the project on Europe's future that ERSTE Foundation and IWM started. We have invited a group of fellows who have been working on the problem of crisis of liberalism and what is happening in the world, and very much decided to present one of the persons. And Maciej is going to tell you much more about what he's doing, but the story was not simply to him to give a lecture, but to have a conversation on some of very radical ideas that he has. In 2017, together with 120 scholars from Poland, really covering left-right, they started working on a possibility for a new constitution of Poland, starting from the fact that you talk about a very much polarized society, and is this not a time to basically look for a new type of consensuses and how democracy can function with such a level of polarization. And this type of a new consensuses goes, and he's going to talk a lot about this, what you're doing in a situation where you don't believe that one of the sides are going to disappear or it is going to change their views dramatically. How you basically have a functioning state and a functioning democracy. And secondly, and this is why we have Andreas Treichl very much asking to be here, what it means economically. If we go with some type of a new consensuses on the political level and coexistence, what it means for the European economy in general. As you know, Poland is the most successful in economic terms European country for the last 30 years. If I'm not wrong, this is the only European country which didn't have a recession for the last 30 years. The level of economic dynamism of Poland, for those of you basically who know, is really amazing. So this was the success story. At the same time, politically, this is one of the most polarized countries that you know. And Christian Ultsch and Die Presse were very good to start this conversation already before we started, because he had an interview that was published yesterday or the day before with Maciej. So my idea is first Maciej, in not more than 10-15 minutes, is going to make his major argument and point. Then for a while we're going to torture him, three of us, with the conversations and trying to basically make it difficult for him. Then we're going to have your questions and comments, and 7:15 we are done. So, Maciej, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. So, yes, when you think Poland, you think one of the most homogeneous countries in Europe, and you are also wrong when you think that. Because part of the Polish economic miracle is really, and that's a classic progressive, almost woke argument that I'm going to make, but it does apply, in my view, to Poland beautifully. The strength, flexibility, innovativeness of Polish economy, which indeed grew by 650% in per capita terms since 1999. That's 6.5 times increase in GDP. That strength, that innovativeness comes from what I would say are 5 layers of diversity that many of us who think about Poland are not, even in Poland, are not truly thinking about. The first one is that Poland is a geographical puzzle that comes from essentially 4 traditions. During the critical 19th century, where national identities were formed, Poland was occupied by Austria, Prussia, and Russia, which is not only different countries, but you know, it's like your paradigmatic different cultures, Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox. And then after 45, to this puzzle came this 4th part, about 38% of the Polish territory, which is former German land. And this territory, there is very rich Polish sociology, anthropology that compares it almost to Western expansion of the US, what happened socially there, a mix of people from different parts of pre-war Poland coming together, in a search for a new beginning, and this 38% now becomes the most solidly progressive, liberal part of Poland, election after election. Yes, while the former Russian and the former Austrian part form the most conservative parts of Poland. But that's only one layer of diversity that makes Poland really unique and makes it really a mosaic of different cultures and ideas and ideologies. Because then you have 45 years of communism. I always think that the most analogous situation, to the extent there are strict analogies in comparative politics, is Atatürk and Turkey. Yes, 45 years of communism in a deeply Catholic country didn't create Homo Sovieticus, like in some other countries which didn't have such a strong entry culture in 45, but it created this incredible split, also sometimes running through families. Some people, especially in the Northwest, were more receptive to these secular, progressive ideas that communists brought with the Red Army, and some were very resistant, especially in the Southeast, and stayed faithful to traditional Catholic values. Then the third very interesting aspect, which is really visible in companies and in economy of Poland, is the class diversity, which always shocks me how much more diverse class-wise it is when you compare it, for example, to Austrian managerial elite. And that's for two reasons. One is, of course, Leszek Balcerowicz and his famous shock therapy saved us from oligarchies that are afflicting many countries in the region, but Polish model of shock transition avoided that. We don't have oligarchies, but we also introduced very egalitarian educational reforms. Think about it as like the opposite of Austrian Mittelschule system. Yes, really a system in which since late 90s almost every child was bused to a gymnasium, to a large town from entire country, and 50% of that generation got higher education, university education. The fourth one is the gender equality in the Polish economic elites. Poland is third in the European Union in women's participation in management. 44% of managers are women. But it also shows more deeply socially that this influence of progressive influence of communism has a staying power. It influences especially the expectations that women have, the cultural expectations that women have, and then it also creates, especially now in the young generation, a huge backlash, especially from young men who resist this vision, this feminist equality-based vision that Polish women have. So you have a situation in which among 20 to 30-year-olds, women vote overwhelmingly for the left, and young men vote overwhelmingly for the far right. And the final level of diversity is the story of mass migration after 2004. 20% of Polish workforce left Poland for at least a year, left to very different places, UK, Germany, Scandinavia, brought back different ideas and different concepts on how to organize society and how the West organizes its society is good or bad. So you can see that those 5 levels work beautifully when all those people are together in businesses. It creates tremendous cognitive diversity in Polish companies, which make them very innovative, but it also kind of like in America, makes politics really poisonous. Because when the same people who easily cooperate, progressive, conservative men, women, Catholics, from different parts in their economic life, when they join social media and they act as citizens, they really become poisonous and hate-filled. So as Ivan mentioned, about 7 years ago, I joined co-formed a group of intellectuals coming from both sides of what was then a deep constitutional crisis. Yes, so in this book, we have 28 authors, let's agree on Poland, and about half of them are peace, right-wing supporters, and half of them, like me, are very strong critics of the government that was in power between 2015 and 2023, of which you probably heard a lot, bad things from international media and commentary, and I contributed to this very strong criticism of that government. Nevertheless, I do think that their support is organic, that it's real, that it is, I gave you like a rich historical story why it would emerge and it would stay, in my view. And of course, a very important part of the story that I gave is that this support is geographically uneven, yes? And that opens the possibility for what we are proposing in the book, which is to transform the Polish system, which is very much a French-style centralized political system with this kind of semi-executive presidency, into something that would be, I would say, much more familiar to Austrians in the audience. Yes, a system in which there is more governing power, but also more symbolic power, closer to people, in regions which will be traditionally conservative or traditionally more progressive, and which also would make the key cities, the two big cities, Warsaw and Krakow, which are very progressive cities, especially Warsaw is very progressive, Krakow is still progressive, but with a little more traditionalist touch, would actually, and that particular idea is patterned after Vienna, to make them cities with regional rights, which would create very solidly progressive city-states, like Vienna, and deeply conservative regions that surround them, yes? And then things that you don't have in your system, and then I'll finish and let my amazing distinguished interlocutors to pepper me with criticism and questions. The thing that you don't have in your system, but we are in this book suggesting, think about it as kind of a federalist second mover advantage. Yes, I mean, we are not just copying what you or Germany have, we are looking at what we think works in your system and what doesn't work in your system, and we are trying to adapt it smartly. The basic idea to bring power closer to the people is very much in the Austrian or German spirit. The institutional details, as a Nobel Prize winner Elinor Ostrom, institutional economist, once said, in institutions details matter, and as a lawyer, as a law professor, I will agree with it very strongly. Details can change a system, so we shouldn't discuss a broad idea of centralized or decentralized, because both can work well or poorly. The thing that we really want to improve upon your experience is to really force the regional governance, which we are calling voivods, based on old Polish name, to participate in central government to the extent that the Bundesrat still doesn't do. So we would see our Senate as literally something akin of a European Council, in which the regional governors, including the mayors of the two big cities, would basically need to participate and approve all legislation at the national level. And you can see what it does because we see it in Brussels. Yes, what it does, it gives tremendous power to this middle level of governance, transforms this regional governors, who would be by definition very diverse, into kind of guardian angels of the Polish Republic. So we want to hand the keys from the narrow winner, the narrowest winner of the national election, the president, very far right president, Karol Nawrocki, won by less than 2 percentage points. We want to unpack and deconstruct this winner-takes-all system, which is very, very dangerous for Poland, and give the keys largely to our Polish Council, yes, the European Council of regional democratically accountable leaders. Of course, you still have the central government, which deals with things where we do agree as Poles. For example, strongly defending ourselves against Russian imperialism. Here, there is no controversy. But in issues that divide us, what to teach at schools, which monuments to have, what should we present in our historical museums, we would give way more power to people at the lower level of the government, forcing them institutionally to cooperate with each other at the central level and participate in the central governance as well. So that's the basic idea. It's interesting that whether you think it's smart or stupid, all 28 people from both peace supporters and us progressives sign up and put their name as co-authors of this book. So at least that's like a micro-level example that there is something we can agree on despite our differences. I mean, the book was published in Polish in 2023, and in one of its great achievements is that edited book about constitutionalism becoming a national bestseller is a pretty unusual feat. So at the very least that we achieved. And now into the future, the politicians are well aware about this project. And I hope this idea, this triumphalist fantasy, that we will come back almost reactionary in nature. Yes, it's a progressive, liberal reactionary idea of we will just turn back the clock, the far right will disappear, everything will be great again, just in our own liberal way. If that goes away, I think thinking about the new social contract can start in the earnest. Thank you.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Maciej. I mean, I already had a chance to ask a few questions in the interview. Nevertheless, I would like to add one more, which is, do you and your colleagues have any form of political support for your ideas inside the parties? Question number one, and if I could add a little one as well. So what I don't quite get is, so you described this diversity in Poland as a source of economic success. And how could you overcome this poisonous atmosphere in politics? So how can you take the poison out of the system? How could that work?
Okay, two great questions. On the political support, Leszek Balcerowicz, when he was designing the Polish economic reforms, worked in the 80s in some, obscure office for years until the time came when politicians realized this is the way forward, and he changed Polish history, and that's why we are where we are. So we are very patient because fundamentally, and in a sense, I am sad as a progressive. I would love our diagnosis to be false. I would love the world to return to the end of history that I remember from my youth. But to the extent that it won't, I have a very strong sense that the time of this kind of thinking, not maybe this concrete proposal, but this time of thinking is coming. That liberals just need a bit more time to understand that the other side will not disappear. So I think there are two options for Poland. Either we will find some sort of a deal like this, or we will end up in an authoritarian system. I don't think there is a third option. On your second question, how this overcomes? Well, it overcomes the poisonous atmosphere because it lowers the stakes at the central level. Yes, I mean the poisonous atmosphere is not because we enjoy hating each other, but because in the current system where the winner truly takes all, it's rational to mobilize by portraying the other side as a threat, because the other side is a threat, yes? If we can have a situation in which maybe, in one part of the country you have abortion and in other part of the country you don't have abortion, then there is much less reason to have the central politics being so poisonous and adversarial, because at the end of the day, both sides can enter the national conversation from the position of strength, from the parts of the country where they will be organically strong, and then there is just like much less incentive to do this polarization dial, to push the gas on polarization. And there are actually quite a few incentives to put the stop brakes, because there is a lot of, in the system, there is a lot of benefit that comes from collaboration. Also unusual collaborations. We actually, the interesting second part of the book, we actually teamed up with some of the leading, really first-class Polish fiction writers, and we actually created 5 short stories, fiction stories, about how 5 regions of Poland, from very conservative to very liberal, would look like. So if you are interested in seeing how it would work, we actually present it in a very kind of narratively complex and rich way, and our teams of scholars who worked with the writers, the fiction writers, this was a partnership, suddenly realized that in many aspects a very conservative region can actually cooperate on things like healthcare with a very progressive region, yes? And that will deconstruct this monster of polarization, because Poland under this system is not split by half, yes? It becomes a true mosaic of, we have currently 16 regions. If we add Warsaw and Kraków, we'll have 18, so there will be 18 Polands. Under the current system, we all need to sign up either to the camp of Mr. Tusk or to the camp of Mr. Kaczynski. That's the only way to have any influence over our political future. In this system, you don't need to sign up to anybody. You can be in one of the many shades of Polish conservatism and progressives.
Andreas.
Okay. So, well, you need to know that Maciej has been my most important teacher on Poland over the past years. So for me to criticize him is difficult. But there are some things where I really question his wish. We have stated that Poland has been the most economically successful country in all of Europe over the past 20 years. There is no question about that. And now he goes along because he believes that the Polish political system is so toxic that Poland needs to adopt structures of the 2 countries that have been the least successful economic countries in Europe, namely Austria and Germany. And somehow he believes that subsidiarity and federalism will lead to a more equal or better political situation in Poland. And I think he is, in a way, too polite to point out the other differences between Poland and the rest of Central and Eastern Europe and the rest of Western Europe, which is number one, it has by far the best education in all of Central and Eastern Europe, and probably one of the best educational systems in all of Europe. And by luck or by whatever, it switched from communism to the free world without oligarchism. Therefore, Poland is substantially less corrupt than most of its neighbors. And you have a situation where two totally opposing political parties have managed to keep the economic development stable. The economy grew under PIS extremely well, and the economy grew under Tusk extremely well. Well, the position that Poland presently has is weak on a European level, maybe because of the political situation. And because of the political situation, the Germans, the French, and the English do not accept Poland on the table because they know that Tusk is standing for something completely different than Nawrocki. And this is true democracy, what we've seen there. I mean, this guy lost by a couple of thousand votes, and it totally changed the perception of Poland. The question we have to ask ourselves, would the English, the French, and the Germans have accepted Poland on the table now if Trzaskowski had won the election? So if it had been the other way around, maybe. But the question to me is, what does it add? The Germans, the French, and the English have not achieved anything so far. Would they have achieved more if Poland had been on the table? And only if we would answer that question with yes, I would start a discussion about the validity or the quality of the Polish political system. In my view, I don't know. I can't answer the question. That's what Ivan is here for. Would Europe be stronger if Western Europe would accept Poland as an equal partner? And I think that's the last point I would like to make, where Maciej doesn't talk about it. Part of the non-acceptance of Poland as a partner is not based on the difficult political situation between the two major political parties. It's simply in the DNA of Western Europeans to look down on Eastern Europeans as lower quality Europeans that do not yet have a place on the table. I think that's part of it too. Looking down on Central and Eastern Europeans, although they are in many ways substantially more successful than Western Europeans, we can't get rid of that. And we need to get rid of that. And if we can get rid of that, maybe we can spare you turning Poland into an Austrian, which I think would be really, really dangerous.
Can I continue? Because then you're going to get it. And the first is, we can summarize basically the idea, and it's not only about Poland, this kind of a geographical view of how you can deal with a highly polarized society, saying liberalism for the liberal, cannibalism for the cannibals, everybody's going to have their own place, and then basically they're going to feel very much at home. I'll start with the first paradox. We're talking about the western part of Poland being the most liberal one. But you should know where the liberal Poland comes from. It's come from this same East that now basically is very conservative, because as you know, when the Germans have been expelled from Poland, these regions have been populated by people coming from Western Ukraine, Poland, Eastern regions, the regions which now are very much voting. Very conservative, sorry, this is probably Poland calling. And I'm saying this because it is extremely important, because it appears that this kind of urban culture and structure and so on turned to be more important than basically the background. This is my daughter, and it's not going to be anymore. And I'm saying this because I understand, I do believe that, this is why we're so happy to have Maciej here. In the moment of crisis, it's very important to have people who really radicalize certain type of positions. Because just to say that there is a polarization and polarization is going to disappear because of this or that, we see structural reasons for polarization to reproduce itself. On communication space, the social media makes it much easier, basically. People are living in a totally different media environments. You have strongly confirming their previous expectations. Secondly, and this is what Andreas said, economically, people don't have the reasons to have very much this polarization because it works. And the European story, I also very much agree, is that Poland is in a certain way too big and too ambitious for Europe. It's not simply that. Then the story is what you're doing with this. And what I like, I'm going to say, and what I'm slightly skeptical. What I like in your analysis is the fact that you're taking the vote of these people seriously. So this is not some people who do vote for the parties that they vote simply because it is a protest vote, or simply basically this is how the church is telling them. Many of these young people who now vote for the far right stop going to church. During the Kaczynski period, you have the biggest drop in a church attendance among the younger population. So while the church is quite important, understanding the vote of some previous generation, this particularly much more libertarian Confederacja type of a vote cannot be explained simply by the church influence. And I'm saying all this because obviously we see the end of the consensual politics of the 1990s, and here I do believe Maciej is totally right. And also, if you're not going to deal something, every election in Poland is going to be a regime change. And not simply going to be a regime change, but you're going to have a major politicization of institutions, and everybody is trying to get control over the courts, over the public television, and to be honest, at some point, even over the business. But can you do what you want without destroying three things that, in my view, was very much important for Poland? You are basically suggesting totally unmaking the historical Polish nation state, which was very much focused on the fact that all this diversity that you're talking about was perceived in the interwar period as the major weakness of the Polish state, because as a result of the wars and destruction of the Jewish population and so on, Poland became very ethnically homogeneous, and this was part of the success also we're talking about. Now this is going to change, but how this is going to change basically your perspective. Secondly, if you are right, and if I'm basically conservative person living in Warsaw, the best thing that I can do is just to go to some of the places which are run by the conservative governments, and you're going to end up with a situation like in the United States, where, for example, I do believe in the mid-1970s, 50% of the Americans have been living in a counties in which one or the other party can win the elections. Now more than 77% of the Americans live in a one-party counties. For the last 20 years, it's only one party winning the elections. You're going to reproduce the situation. So you're going to destroy the social dynamics of the possibility of things to change, and you're going to get with a much more successful economic regions and less successful. And the third, and this is my last point, how you're going to deal with the biggest divide in Europe, which, by the way, is not between East and West, even in geographical terms for Europe as a whole. The major difference in the voting patterns is between the bigger urban areas and the rural areas. So it is not geographical from this historical. This is not Eastern Europe versus Western Europe. And this is America also. Basically, the urban centers are voting in one way. So while I'm very much kind of congratulating you on challenging this very much, what is going to be your response to some kind of skeptical admirers?
No, thank you. So, excellent points. I would start with your very perceptive observation that the population of the most progressive Polish Wild West, the post-German land, actually came from the traditionally most conservative parts of Poland. Well, as a lawyer, I like a contrario reasoning. So I would say if what it takes to change a Polish conservative Catholic into a progressive is double ethnic cleansing of Stalin, that shows you how durable these cultural identities are. Yes, we should not attempt another experiment like what Stalin did with both expulsion of German civilians and a forced expulsion of Poles from eastern parts of the country. Yes, we're currently opposing any thoughts of a similar intervention, for example, in Gaza. Yes, so that shows you why we don't have options really to change those deep cultural identities that are morally anywhere close to acceptable, and that's why we are actually left with one of two options. Yes, either if we keep the centralized systems, the whole system will need to move to the right. Anthony Downs beautifully, more than half a century ago, observed that in a centralized system, the so-called median voter prevails. Median voter definitely went to the right from the 1990s. So if we are all happy with a version of the centralized system moving to the right, whether it's Mette Frederiksen, Mitsotakis in Greece, or Tusk, who also moved to the right on so many aspects, then fine. I think if you are, a true progressive in your heart, like me, you should like this jurisdictional compromise better. Yes, because this is, in many ways, what you said, cities. It's free cities in the Middle Ages. Yes, it's the basic idea that precisely if you don't want to make a compromise, a policy compromise with the far right, you will need to support the jurisdictional compromise. And sooner and later, people will realize that this is an exclusive set of options we have at the table. Because changing our conservative compatriots into something else is not a viable option. So we either hand the keys to Melonis of our democracies, or we accept a dictatorship, or we need to have some sort of geographic compromise, jurisdictional compromise, because, as you mentioned, Ivan, the fundamental cultural difference is geographic, because cities versus urban areas versus rural areas is a type of geography. Like, how are we going to implement it probably depends on each country. I was recently giving few talks about this book in Canada. There the problem is it actually works pretty well, with an exception of Ontario, which 40% of Canadians live in one province, so these benefits of federalism don't apply to almost half of the country, because Ontario is a very internally diverse state, and there have been serious proposals to split Ontario, including a proposal to create a Vienna-type city-state out of Toronto. This is not my ideas, this have been ideas that were around. Why are we lacking institutional imaginations as liberals to discuss those ideas seriously? Why are we, in effect, accepting potential collapse of the liberal order rather than trying to find creative institutional ways to reform this? I mean, that's partly, the book is partly a provocation to open this institutional discussion, yes, to start putting institutions on the... We have been giving Nobel Prizes to all those institutionalists, but at the end, we are not treating institutions seriously, yes? We are always saying, like, let's be better at TikTok than the far right. That's our solution to this existential, to this new ideological Cold War. It's nonsense, yes? We need to have a conversation. If you don't like this institutional proposal, come up with a better one. Yes, I do believe that it is not going to tank Polish economic competitiveness. The regional governments are already they have very little power from the domestic Polish constitutional order, but they have one noticeable power from outside, because in 2004 nobody wanted to deal with those bizarre EU development policies, structural funds, so we handed it to the regions, the regions. And you know what? The regional operational strategies and the EU structural funds are one of the best part of Polish economic policy. On every dimension of using the European funds, Poland is one of the top of the net beneficiaries. And who does it? Exactly the self-governed voivodeships to which, as I said, we want to hand the keys to the country. They will listen to the businesses much better, and they will in many ways free the central government to do what you, Ivan and Andreas, you want the central government to do, which is to represent Poland, shape Europe, speak on issues of common defense. Polish government is in many ways constrained by this ridiculous conflict over monuments and school curriculums and gay marriage, because this conflict affects the government's ability to act in matters existential. I'm not downplaying the importance of those matters. I mean, if I am, I know, my gay friends truly are in despair after Nawrocki's victory, because of course for them it's probably the possibility of formalizing their marriage, their relationship is gone for a decade. Yes, so I'm not saying this is not this is to underplay the importance of those issues. The very reason why these issues are polarizing Poland is that we do recognize them as very important. I'm simply saying that nobody is benefiting from the current system when we have a change of regime every 4 years. The LGBT community included, yes, they certainly don't benefit from this. Second of all, we will all be worse off if we are governed by Vladimir Putin, because we are so busy fighting each other. And this has been time and again in Polish history. This is not exaggeration. That's how we lost our independence in the 18th century. That's how we lost our independence in 1939, because we were fighting our petty political wars over very important issues, but still petty compared to the very typical Polish dream of independence as a sovereign state in our very unfortunate geography. Yes, and we've been fighting to the last moment, and then our neighbors would decide that our weakness is a reason to take chunks of our lands. Yes, and so I think this is a message. If it can't land in Poland, that we need to find a way to coexist, I don't know where it can work. Then we are doomed to these Hunger Games of existential fight, and either we win by 0.5% and carry on with business as usual, or they win and they institute a right-wing dictatorship, yes? Which is not going to be good for business, Andreas, anyways, yes? Because if you look at a number of things that you rightly praised about Poland have been undermined over the last 10 years because of this crazy political fight. The amazing educational system, one of the first things peace changed was that amazing system that I championed at the beginning of this evening when I said we were busing every kid to a gymnasium, unlike Austrians who sent 70% of kids to Mittelschule because they know at the age of 9 that you will do a white-collar job and you will do a blue-collar job. How crazy that is to a Pole, where we literally were bending backwards to bring every kid to have academic education. And I agree with Andreas, this gave us huge boost. But that was one of the first things that PiS and Mr. Kaczynski changed when they came to power. So we'll see what is the next generation, whether the results will be the same, yes? We see Polish unsustainable budget deficit. Why is it? Because we have in this winner-takes-all polarization, there is almost a Greek-style festival of promises, of spending promises, yes? And sooner or later, it's going to hit also business. So the status quo, I think, is not good for business. Whether this proposal is good for business, I am much more optimistic than you, Andreas. But we need to understand we can't stay as we are, because it finally is going to hit the economic engine as well.
Yes, lest we forget, would you agree to Mr. Treichl's remark that Poland is not sitting at the table in the negotiations with the Americans because the rest of Europe is looking down, or is it because of the very polarization of Polish politics? There's one question. The second one, what makes you think that the dictatorship is around the corner in Poland? And third, very short remark, I tried to think about it, and in my mind, there doesn't come up any single example in which a very heterogeneous system has become consensual recently. You can think of Switzerland, which is a long time ago. You can think about Austria. It was after 1945. You can think maybe about Lebanon, but this system completely fell apart in the 70s, and now we have completely different circumstances of polarization. So the task is very difficult. Yeah, and do you have a recent example for your daring idea and proposal?
And Maciej, because I'm afraid that we're not going to have time. So let's go to Andreas, because I also want you to come to see, and then you're going to have the possibility to kill us with one bullet. Yeah, Andreas.
Okay. No, look, I think the proposal for subsidiarity is an incredibly interesting topic that we live in very different fashions in Europe. And the EU itself is the worst example of subsidiarity that we have in Europe, because it's a totally inverted subsidiarity. Given that, if you regard the EU as the top political level in Europe, it does not control the level below, but the level below controls it. The nation states control what's happening at the EU level. The reason why subsidiarity in Austria works so badly, because we have the same thing here. Not only on a country level, but also on a political level. There's one party in Austria that is extremely bound to subsidiarity, and where the money flows from the bottom to the top. And you see that in the quality of the politicians. So on the municipal level, you have pretty good politicians. On the country level, okay. And on the top level, it really sucks. So you have to make sure if you do that, that this reform, this constitutional reform, creates, unless you want to turn Poland into a Switzerland, creates a subsidiarity that really makes sense, where the lower levels only have responsibility for those things that they really pay for, and where they're receiving the taxes and they have to fulfill it. But that you do not disturb the level from top to bottom. And the real question to you is, what is the educational system in Poland having an effect, which has been changed by PiS, badly changed? What effect does it have on the urban population and on the rural population? And don't you have a huge difference there that could also create problems in the future? Because that's a huge problem that we have here.
So let's get also the question coming from you. And please, how many people want to have 3 persons? Yeah, 4. Okay. 5 under the conditions that we are going to be brief and brilliant.
So I didn't read your book, sorry, but I will. Still asking a question. So you talked about the diversity of women in Poland, that they're in management positions, and then you talk about the divide of young women and young men. So how is federalism, solving this deep divide between, gender divide, and is it bigger than the regional divide? And what is happening to women in these regions? Are you chasing them out to cities, or do they have an economic agency but no political agency?
Thank you very much, yeah. There is somebody behind you, so everybody's going to have the 4, yeah.
We've so far only been speaking about constitutional aspects. How about foreign policy? Because I can't see a real big divide on that issue, specifically with regard to the situation in your neighboring country, where you have been since long a defender and have been trying for decades to explain to the rest of Europe what was going on, and nobody was listening.
There is a question. Yeah, please, and then.
Why not go all the way and adopt the Swiss system?
Okay, and there is 3 questions here in the front row. Clemena was first, yeah.
So I'm so puzzled about Poland. You have this star performance economically and this polarization. Now we know from other countries the theories that have been developed was that actually what drives polarization and populism is basically driven by stagnation, no economic growth, or large inequalities. But I don't know how the inequality is in Poland, but economic growth was very good. So I'm very puzzled that you do have these problems. And Germany is a very good case because you have Eastern Germany and you have Western Germany. So in Eastern Germany, you had this AfD, everybody voted for the AfD, and the region was doing very, very badly. And now the whole country is doing very badly. And now the AfD, the right-wing party, is gaining a lot of votes. So it seems that it's driven economically. So why is it not in Poland?
Yeah, thank you, Clemena. I can just quote a very famous political scientist, Adam Przeworski, when for the first time Kaczynski came to power. He said, according to the political theory, this should not have happened. So please, Clemena.
Well, thank you very much. This is so interesting. I just wanted to ask you something and to see whether you would agree. I work on religion and on theology, and I liked very much your insight, if I understand you correctly, that there's certain questions on which it is actually impossible to come to an agreement. For a religious person and in theology, abortion is murder. It's not abortion, it's murder. And it's not a fetus, it's a baby, it's a human being, and so on. So if you accept that, there are people on one side who will have these sort of religious conservative views, and they'll never change them. And you have on the other side progressives for whom abortion, gay marriage, and all the rest are very, very important issues. And there can be no agreement about them. I'm trying to imagine, on the basis of the people I know, I go a lot to theology conferences, and I meet a lot of people who are not uneducated, they're not right-wing, they're certainly not extreme right-wing, they can be politically very liberal, but they're socially very conservative. For people like that, if they are even concentrated in certain provincial areas of the country, they will still not accept that you have these cities in which people murder human beings, So how is exactly this sort of concentration of people in various places, going to help about in the context of these issues? You know, that's my question.
Yeah, Professor Galintikhanov.
If you need any assistance, I wrote them down.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating, and I should read the book. Two very brief questions. One, why are you confident? You raised this prospect of a dictatorship, and why are you confident that enshrining regionalism or subsidiarity in the constitution would stop a dictatorship? Historically, there is very little evidence that this is an effective tool. And the second question, I was intrigued when you mentioned writers contributing to the book. Who are they, and do they also write about the conservative regions of Poland?
So this is, there was one last question there. Yeah, please.
So this is the perspective of a Polish person who lives in America, or an American who spends a lot of time in Poland. But a two-part question. Why do you think federalism will kind of depolarize Poland? In America, we have a very federal system, and we have policy diversity state to state, but an extremely, and I think actually more polarized political system. I think there's more disagreement about more range of things. I think there's actually an area of consensus in Poland around the role of the state and the economy that's closer together, and it's been important for political growth. You actually open it up more. So I'm not sure why federalism actually depolarizes. Another way, it's a pathway. Don't at some point, you laid out this very strong case, I think, that there's deep social support for a right-wing party that's lasting and it's going to persist in the future. For this kind of big constitutional change, don't you at some point have to win an election in a very massive way? And so doesn't that just shift the burden from, you know, saving democracy to winning an election and then changing the whole system? Why not just win elections?
Yeah, thank you. This is really the last question on this one. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. What is the sentiment among the right-wing movements in Poland regarding the European Union? Because in Germany it seems like there's kind of this opinion that the European Union is the root of all evil. And do you think there could be a kind of a European movement from civil society for more European sovereignty, geopolitical, economically, that could kind of be the antidote to this ghost of neo-fascism? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you, Maciej. You're going to have 13 minutes.
For 8 questions.
And the charm is that you can basically choose the question. Just let's, in one sentence, put one of mine, which is going to change not your constitutional proposal, but your ideology. You're saying very much progressive, progressive, progressive. If you're going to get social cohesion out of the progressive understanding of the state, what progressivism means? Because suddenly liberalism become a privilege.
I'll start with the diagnosis. So actually, the whole first chapter, which we added to the English edition, is showing how Poland debunks all the major theories of right-wing populism. So I agree with Adam Przeworski that the 2015 election was not predictable, but I would add using the existing theories, which we characterize as being united in their condescension to our conservative compatriots. If you say that voting for far-right radical or revolutionary conservative parties must be some sign of stagnation, empty stomach, grudge, manipulation, then we come back to what Ivan said. You don't really take their views seriously, yes? Because that's not how we think about why we vote for progressives, yes? Of course, we could analyze in a Marxist way while each of us votes how we vote. But when we go and support, I don't know, equality, freedom, we tend to think, when we look at the mirror, that we do it because we like those ideas. So why can't we afford it to our compatriots? Instead of looking for an excuse, a grudge that they have, Poland in that sense is a wake-up call for all of us, yes? Because indeed, there is no grudge that conservative Poles can have. Poland not only grew 6.5 times in one generation, it managed to achieve it almost miraculously in comparative terms, keeping its inequality lower than France. And there is a very strong reason why the entire political elite agreed that the farmers, the peasants shouldn't pay taxes, income taxes, and they don't. Poland in 2004, the social democratic government at the time, negotiated a very hard bargain, putting a lot of EU money in direct subsidies to the farmers. So Polish farmers don't pay income taxes and get a lot of money from the EU, and they still vote for the conservatives because, in my view, they are not of course, any incumbent party, in this case liberals or progressives, mainstream, will suffer if economy is weak. In that sense, the support for the AfD in Germany because of weak economy is a natural phenomenon. But to say that this is the whole story is so incredibly condescending to our conservative compatriots. To say that there must be some grudge, some deprivation that is forcing people to choose those values. It's not how we think about our own values. So I think that's why Poland is an interesting.
It's not what you are saying. It's zero-sum.
No, but
when the whole pie doesn't grow, zero-sum.
Yeah, no, I get it. But it comes to your question about that it is in many ways a zero-sum game because of the nature of our disagreements. Yes, and in the book we actually compare it to the disagreements in the previous ideological Cold War with Marxism, which conceptually was, we argue, actually easier than the current one. Yes, because money is fungible, and you can, create a democratic version of welfare state. That's what the West did, which placates some Marxist sympathizers to the extent that they stay loyal to the system, not as communists, but as social democrats. That's the story of how the Cold War was won. Now the problem, because of what you mentioned, is really much more conceptually difficult, because you can't at the same time give LGBT people rights and truly respect the views of Catholics that it's a sin. Yes, I mean there is no logical way of doing the two things. And our argument is, by virtue of the nature of our current 21st century civilizational difference, jurisdictional compromise is the only viable solution. Yes, and then all the other things which you brought up, which is how it's gonna affect various groups of people. Actually, my conservative co-authors would tell you the stories of how progressive governance affects them, because now they can't tell their children that homosexuality is a sin, because if the child repeats it in the school, in the progressive school, they get penalized by the progressive teacher. Yes? So I am, of course, much more sympathetic to the plight of progressive women in conservative regions, but I'm simply saying that my conservative compatriots would give you an analogous story of how their important rights and identities are violated when we govern. So the question is what we can do. Our argument is then let democracy sort it out, just at the lower level of governance. Yes, whether this is going to be Switzerland, yes. I mean, in a sense, it's Switzerland in the fundamental insight that this subsidiarity should not only govern petty issues, but should govern serious issues. So the details of how this works should and can be debated. But the fundamental idea to reverse the thinking, which we now associate with subsidiarity, which is the least important technical things we decentralize, the important things we keep central. We are inviting to flip this logic upside down, because we say this current cultural conflict that we have necessitates to decentralize some of the heavy issues. Which comes to the American example. You know, I was educated in the US. I teach US constitutional law at CU. I have a very different vision of what has happened in the US. In my view, the progressives violated the federal contract by centralizing government. Actually, since the since first economically and then socially, for very good reasons, for reasons I emphatically support. Just to be clear, yes, I thought that the Warren Court was morally an admirable achievement of governance. But if I was a conservative with different views, that centralization, the centralization of a very broad palette of human rights, including abortion rights, which were, federalized through Roe v. Wade, would basically diminish the benefits of federalism to me, yes? So in many ways, it's a good story where a lot of policies which are still important are still regionalized, and I would argue if they were not regionalized, imagine US is like France. If US was governed like France, you would already have a civil war. So in many ways, the US is a strong case for federalism, because given how incredibly diverse this huge continent-wide country is, the reason why it's holding together is only because it has substantial decentralization. And the last point, sorry I couldn't tackle all, but my time is up, which is, on one hand, yes, there are no precedents because liberals are not thinking institutionally. Yes, so it's a catch-22 situation. Yes, we won't have those examples of this or other reforms if we don't promote among liberals the idea that the solution to this is, again, not better TikTok, but institutional reform of our democracies. And not even abandoning our liberal principles, because that's now also in fashion, to simply copy far-right policies. But I would also argue that it's not entirely true that there is no hint that decentralization may be a way. Because, virtually all, except of France, large European countries did decentralize over the last 50 years. Italy had significant decentralization reforms, and we could debate until tomorrow morning whether it was good or bad. But again, I think consider an alternative if those regions didn't have that level of powers that they have. Of course, Belgium, again, an example that you can laugh off very easily. But again, think about what would happen if Belgium wasn't decentralized. Yes, if it was run, centrally like France, whether we would have a complete split up of that society. Yes, the UK and devolution reforms. Okay, you can say Scotland seeking independence is maybe it's a negative case for you, maybe except if you are a Scot, yes, because then you are probably happy that you are not governed from Westminster. So actually, I think there are a lot of cues, little hints that decentralization may be a way forward, and that the progressive instincts to centralize, to control, to make sure that our values are imposed top-down, which is very much the intuition that US progressives have shared over the last half a century, that they may, in the long run, be actually quite damaging, even though they give you a short satisfaction, a dopamine boost of having a great nationwide victory, but it creates the social situation where huge and growing opposition, the moral majority in the US, gets mobilized and can sweep back like we see in the US.
Amazing. You answered nearly all of the questions. It's 3 minutes left.
That's what I was told.
Except one, this was whether there is a foreign policy consensus.
Yes, and if we didn't fight over monuments and school curriculum and abortion, we would be able to act upon this consensus as like one proud and influential nation. Another reason to go with our institutional reform.
So, first, I hope you agree with me that there was no lack of institutional imagination. Secondly, it's very important that there is somebody who knows how to argue his case. And if you don't believe that he is not influential, keep in mind that this was the major advisor to Andreas Treichl, and Andreas Treichl decided to enter the Polish market. So let's basically thank MACIEJ, and thank you for everybody for the conversation.